Hello and welcome to episode 151 of Section 138. I'm your host, Mark Colley, as always, joined by my co host, Bryson and Jacob. And we couldn't be talking about a better series for the Toronto Blue Jays. They sweep the Oakland Athletics. How are you guys?
Great to be here. What a weekend. Pretty much topped off by an amazing comeback twice on Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, just pretty much complete games from the Jays. Great performances from both starting pitching. The offense is back. I guess we were right. It took a series against the Orioles to get the bats going. A good homestand featuring a couple comebacks once again. And as predicted, the Jays sweep the A's and are somehow somewhat back in it in the AL wildcard race. So here we go.
Yeah, Bryson, you were right all along. Jacob and I said they would take 2 of 3. And even I thought that was overly optimistic. I wasn't too certain that that would happen, but Blue Jays sweep it. It's kind of insane that we're at this point in the season and they have some tiny shred of hope that people are hanging on to. And got to be honest, I'm kind of getting back into it. But how are you, Jacob?
I am beyond shocked about what the heck happened this weekend. I'll take it. It's definitely making things a little more interesting. And now this New York series is very, very interesting. I think it's 3 games. Blue Jays are 3 games back of the Yankees, or excuse me, 4 games, but still you could be within, or you could take the Yankees or overtake them if you win. But one thing I will say, give a quick shout out. I am 3-0 since I've been allowed to watch the games at work. So for those of you who are betting on games, I will be watching every time I show up. So little thing there, but yeah, anyways, overall, very, very good series. A lot of offense. I mean, you look at these games, I think there was maybe 50 runs between the two teams in the 3 games. That's ridiculous. And you know what? It's making September a whole lot more interesting for this team.
Yeah, I think the final stat was 29 runs total for the Blue Jays over the course of the series. Not sure if that's right because they scored 8, of course, in the Sunday game, and then they scored 10 in Saturday's game and 11 in Friday's game. And of course, Friday's game was a wild one. But Jacob, just on that note, even if the Blue Jays sweep this series, they'll still be a half game back of the Yankees. But still, like that, we're nitpicking here. That's still awesome thing if they sweep this series upcoming against the Yankees. But yeah, Friday night's game was the wild one of this series. And at one point in that game, it looked like the season was over because everyone knew going into this series, we talked about it. This was a must-win series. You had to do something special in this series against Oakland to show that the Blue Jays were still in the race, to not fall behind and not fall too far behind Oakland. And they come out, they're down 8-2, and then in an instant with 2 outs in the 8th inning, they just come to life, right? They have a runner on second base, 2 outs, and they get hit after hit after hit. They get a grand slam from Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and then we go to the 9th inning, and again, it seems like the season is over. It seemed like that was a fun inning. You go to the 9th, the bullpen blows it. Oh, well, the season is over. But then you come back out, and Marcus Semien hits that walk-off 3-run homer. It was really the game of the season. There's no other way to put it. And you can't describe the feelings that you go through watching a game like that, having the Blue Jays be down so much and then come back. And it feels like at that point they are guaranteed to win the game. You have to win a game like that. And then they blow it again and then they come back again. It's just a wild turn of events. And to have the season hinging on that one moment, it felt like it was huge. And then, of course, they come out Saturday and Sunday and win both those games as well. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts about the Friday night game because that's the game that everyone was talking about. It's the game of the season. I had a lot of fun watching it, very nervous watching it, but a lot of fun definitely watching it.
I'll tell you what, if you had fun during this game, then you better buckle up for the next 4 or 5 years because this is a sign of things to come. And one of the things that I heard at the end of the Blue Jays in 30 showing, Dan Schulman said something like, if the Blue Jays make the playoffs, this is one of the games you'll look back on and say this is the one that helped them get in. And I think, I mean, standings wise, yes, I think if they lost this game, it probably would have been over. It probably would have been too far of a gap because both the Yankees and the Red Sox all had I think they only lost the Sunday game, which is the game the Blue Jays obviously won, but if they had lost, they would have been 6 games back of a wild card spot. And At that point, I think you're looking at probably calling or throwing in the towel. But you know what? The offense, it came around. I mean, I don't really know what else to say other than the fact that the offense, the entire series, it was fantastic. But you look at we talk about how they were like 1 for 30 with runners in scoring position going into that Tiger series, and it was just at times it was okay in the Orioles series, but it still wasn't great. But you have three guys on, 2 outs. Gurriel launches a ball into, I think it was the second deck too. Like I think it was a breaking ball that he hit. He was, he hit that into the stratosphere almost. And you know what? This team, it's showing that even though the odds were 7% making the playoffs going into this series, I think that they don't care. I honestly, I do think that this team has a shot of really overtaking teams. They overtook the Athletics in this series with this winner. Technically, they're tied with them 4 games back, both of them, but it's a lot better than what it looked like going into the series. And the one thing that I will say, despite the fact that the offense was so great and the fact that even though they were down in the 9th inning, I had no doubts. I knew that they were going to come back. To be completely honest, like Ross Stripling said, never a doubt in my mind. But had the Blue Jays have lost that game, I think we would be talking about how this was one of the worst games of the season. There were a couple of errors. There was one error I think charged to Bichette. There were a couple of misplays by him and other guys throughout the field. You look at Nate Pearson's first inning. Teoscar Hernandez had there was a bloop single where I think he misplayed it. Probably shouldn't have jumped for it or dove for it. Should have maybe tried to just play it off the hop. There was pretty bad pitching in that. I mean, Alek Manoah, 2 hit batters. It looked like he was pretty rattled after that. And I think he was charged with 6 earned runs. So all 6 of the runs were earned. That's not very good. And Dan Shulman also, he said this is a learning experience. You can call it that for Alek Manoah. He's still a rookie. He's barely made 20 starts in the big leagues, but overall, like the offense was fantastic, but still, when you look at the fine details of this game, it was not very good for the team. But you mentioned the errors, the lack of pitching, but all of that goes out the window. I don't. I said that if they lost, this would have been the worst game of the season. They didn't lose. They won. It was probably the best game of the season, to be completely fair to the team. And what a way for Marcus Semien to really put a cap on a great season. And I say put a cap as if this is the end. There's still probably going to be a couple moments for him. You put on that jacket after the end of the game. It was the perfect way, I think, to end the game. And to see, like, to be completely honest, going into the 8th inning when you're down 8-2, I was like, whatever. I'll watch the game, but I'm just watching it to pass time at this point. And then I see 8-3, 8-4, then 8-8. Like the 8-8 notification, it made my heart skip like 3 beats because I didn't expect that, and especially with 2 outs, you have a bases loaded walk, and then that grand slam. It just, for all the bad moments the Blue Jays bullpen has had this season, it's nice to finally be on the opposite end of that. And if the team somehow gets into the playoffs, I think this will be not only standings wise one of the helping games, but it'll also be the turnaround for them, because you realize, hey, we were down 8-2 and we scored 9 runs in the last 2 innings. We can easily overtake any team, and hey, easily take a wild card game if it comes to that.
Yeah, this was, if you're completely right. If the Jays somehow do get in, this is the game to look back on. And I do say that with caution, because we do know the series that lies ahead of them. And that's why we've witnessed, I guess, over the past month or two, of how things can quickly change based on what we saw going back to the end of July when they first came back, when they went on that first run, when they went on that losing streak, or when they had the bad road trip starting out west and then through Seattle, through Washington. So that's why I'm going to take this all with some caution. But this weekend is what they needed. They needed it at least 2 out of 3 at worst. And that's what they're going to need this week. They're going to need to take 3 out of 4. But, looking back on the series in particular, they have kept their season alive with this. And it's no question about that. Amazing performances from pretty much everyone on the most part. And going back to Friday, it just, I mean, Jacob, you mentioned it too. Like, out of everything that's happened this year, the Jays have been probably one of the worst, or just the team with the least amount of luck and the worst luck basically in the entire league. And when it's 8-3 or 8-2, nobody really has a lot of faith. I'm sure a lot of people turn off the TV at that point. I've learned from many experiences to never do that for particular reasons, even going back to a couple of years ago. So the game was always on. I think everyone kind of, and for those who kept the game on, I'm sure people kind of started to focus again in the 8th inning, because it obviously starts off with the Breivik-Valera walk. Breivik-Valera walk, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. singles, brings in 8-3. And then, of course, we all know what happens after that. People start walking. I think it was Alejandro Kirk walked. Teoscar Hernandez walked. I think even before that, Bo Bichette got hit by a pitch. That loads the bases for Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who pretty much caps off an amazing weekend. But first of all, that was the start of it. Hits a grand slam, ties the game. That was the first comeback. The crazy part about this is that they made 2 comebacks. And again, in the second comeback came from Marcus Semien, who takes it off of his former team to win it for the Jays. So that must have felt good. And you have to imagine that felt good. But, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. in particular, an RBI machine this weekend, finishes the weekend with 10 RBIs, had himself probably one of this is definitely the best hot streak he's been on this season. This is the best baseball he's been playing. And even over the last 15 days, his numbers have been showing that. An OPS over 1,000 at 1,029, batting .370 with 2 home runs, 14 RBIs in that span. He's been heating up, one of the best hitters for sure on this team right now. And it's not even close. Yeah, not even close whatsoever. There's a lot of highlights from this weekend. And, even coming off of a bad start from Alek Manoah, things just weren't looking good. And Mark, I think you capped it off perfectly. I think a lot of people thought at that point in time, the season was over. I mean, Alek Manoah allows 6 runs in 5 innings. Nate Pearson comes on, and obviously he wasn't sharp in his very first appearance either. A couple runs come in from that. And then, at that point, you're thinking that this is it. Even regardless if the Jays take 2 out of 3 this weekend, if you look at the standings now, if they did take 2 out of 3, they would have been 5 games back, and essentially they would have made up nothing, which is why we all know the position they're in. We all know the math. That is why they need to over exceed these expectations if they have any signs of life, or they want to show any signs of life in that wild card race. And that's exactly what they did. Going back to why I predicted a sweep, I think that this team knows that they have to take that next step. And 2 out of 3 wasn't good enough this weekend. It wasn't acceptable. And they know that I think they believe they can do it. And I think the most frustrating part too, from everyone and all Jays fans across the country, is that we know they can do it. They just, unfortunately, they have been inconsistent pretty much all year in terms of, them being hot at the same time. And what I mean by that is, when the offense is hot, the pitching's cold. When the pitching's hot, the offense goes cold. And we've seen that for pretty much the past, or pretty much at least the second half of August till now. It's just been inconsistent all throughout. And that's what it looked like too in game 1 of the series, when Alek Manoah allowed 6 runs. But Saturday and Sunday, the Jays settled down. Jose Barrios makes a great start on Saturday. We all know Robbie Ray is going to have a great day when he pitches as well. And he did that on the Sunday. We'll probably get into the other 2 games in a little bit, but I'll still focus on game 1. So it just, something clicked in that 8th inning, and something completely switched, turned the tables for sure. And, as much as Lourdes Gurriel Jr. was leading the way with that, there were so many other contributors in that. And we know the Marcus Semien walk-off. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. continues to hit the bat well as well. I think he went 3 for 4 in that game. So lots of things that turned the game around for the Jays. If you're going to ask me, or pretty much ask anyone, if the Jays had that in them to do that against a team who they're chasing at the time, who they were chasing at the time in the Oakland A's, to cap off a comeback like they did, scoring 6 runs in the 8th inning and then 3 runs in the 9th inning, pretty much would have called you crazy. I think anybody would have called you crazy for that one. And even after that comeback, we know Jordan Romano comes in, he gives up 2 runs. Things aren't looking good again. And, the thought process that you have is, they came back all for nothing. And that's why it made it so special, pretty much what happened in the bottom of the 9th, when the Jays capped that off. And none other than Marcus Semien, who we all know is going to get paid this offseason. But what a special season to witness from Marcus Semien, and even somebody like Robbie Ray. 2 guys that are probably going to be the head of the free agent class this winter, if not one of the top people or top free agents this winter. And, it's just a special season to have out of both of them. And it's definitely been a pleasure to have them on this team, and who knows what the future holds with them. But, we still have a month left to go. And I guess we're going to get to that, cross that bridge when we get to it. But the Jays still have an important 4-game series, and you have to make the most out of this as well. And you go back to yesterday in particular, the Baltimore Orioles helped out the Jays yesterday with the late game rally over the Yankees. I think that's something that nobody really predicted that was going to happen. And of course, Cleveland helps out the Jays as well. They beat the Red Sox 11-5. So the Jays get some help yesterday. They make up some ground, as much as it doesn't look like that on the standings as much as it should, because the Jays did gain a couple games on the Yankees, who are now only half of a game ahead of the Red Sox in that first wild card spot, because I believe at the beginning of the weekend there were about 2 games. So as much as it doesn't really show it, the Jays made up some significant ground this weekend, and they can't stop, and they have to continue this throughout the rest of the season. But we already know this, and we're going to see what happens as well this week in New York.
Right, that's the big thing. Like, even a week ago, we were saying the Yankees were uncatchable, that the Blue Jays would just have to catch the Red Sox. And now, like, the Red Sox and Yankees are essentially tied. Like, yeah, the Yankees have 1 game up, but for all intents and purposes, they're in the exact same spot in the standings. And the Blue Jays, for them, it's much more advantageous to be trying to catch the Yankees and the Red Sox because they have 7 games against the Yankees, including this 4-game set. So, you know, we can talk more about the situations and what might happen, but if you take 3 of 4 in this series, I know that's a huge ask. You're talking about the Yankees, who are a good team. They won 13 in a row at one point, even though they are 4-6 in their last 10 games. They are a good team. But if you take 3 of 4 from the Yankees, then in the worst case scenario, you're 2.5 back of the second wild card spot, depending what happens with the Red Sox. In the best case scenario, you are 2 games back from that second wild card spot. So you can see the situation unfolding where you're going into the final 2-3 weeks of the season with only 2.5 games to make up, including a 3-game set against the Yankees. So it's very possible, if you come out of this series with a big series win, that the Blue Jays can make up that ground, be in the conversation until the final weeks of the season. The one sticking point in that potentially is the Seattle Mariners, because they are the one team now officially in between the Blue Jays and the wild card spots, because this series with Oakland, as huge as it was to pick up those games on the Yankees and on the Red Sox, it was even bigger to pick up those games on Oakland itself. We officially passed Oakland in the standings. It's only by 1/100th of a percentage point in the standings, but we are listed officially above Oakland in the standings. So essentially tied, but just because we've had 2 less games than them and each of us are 11 games over 500. Effectively, the Blue Jays have a better record than them. Anyways, the one sticking point is Seattle, because that's the team in the way, and they've won 5 in a row. They're hot. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They're 3 games back of the Red Sox, 3.5 from the Yankees. So they're a game ahead of the Blue Jays. So that's the sticking point in this plan that you're laying out for the Blue Jays to make it back into the postseason and make it back into contention. But it's still very possible. And you look at how this team is playing right now, things can change on a dime. And I think that's what was most remarkable about that Friday game. It really changed on a dime. The season was dead with 4 outs left in a game, and there was nothing cooking, right? You have Breivik Valera on second base. That's it, with a 6-run deficit and 4 outs to work with. Like, that's ridiculous to expect it to turn around. And it really came out of nowhere. And it was in a matter of like 10 minutes. You go from down 8-2 to tied 8-8. It was really, really remarkable with the walks, a hit by pitch, a couple singles in there. That's what blows me away the most. And that's what gives me some hope heading into these final weeks. Again, we do want to curb our hope and enthusiasm about the Blue Jays, because they are still 4 games back. They still have a team in the way, but it's pretty remarkable to think of where they are right now and where they could be in just 4 games time, depending how this series against the Yankees goes. So that's why it's so pivotal for the Blue Jays to take 3 of 4, if not 4 of 4 in this series against the Yankees. It's a lot to ask for, but you can lay out the situation, see where this is going. And this is kind of the place the Blue Jays need to be. It's a dream scenario if you were looking at the Blue Jays just a week ago. And I know we all declared them dead a couple of weeks ago, and we're hopefully going to be very wrong about that. And we hopefully will never live it down, because I'd rather be wrong than have the Blue Jays not make the postseason. But exciting times to be a Blue Jay fan. So for you guys, what are you looking for in this series against the Yankees? Because first off, it's going to be must-watch baseball. We got the first game coming up in a couple hours at 1:00 today on Monday. But what are you looking for the Blue Jays to do in this 4-game set?
I think the key has to be runners in scoring position, because what did they do good in this series against the Athletics? Well, they scored a darn lot of runs, which is just, it's not the case, or it wasn't the case in the previous 2 series, or really ever since they left the Rogers Center after that initial homestand. The offense was pretty dead. That's easily got to be the biggest thing. And the second thing, you got to get good pitching. And I mean, Hyunjin Ryu, he's starting today against Jameson Tyone in the first game. Ryu was actually pretty good in his last start. I know it didn't look too great. Only I think it was 5 2/3 innings with 3 earned runs charged to him, but he had a no hitter going into those 5 2/3, and then he just kind of fell apart. So he's going to need to rebound. As I just pull up, they have Steven Matz. I think they have every starter except for Robbie Ray because he started in yesterday's game. So you're going to need good pitching out of all of those guys. Another thing, we talk about Jordan Romano. That's actually his second straight outing where he's allowed 2 earned runs. So I trust him fully. Still, I'm not saying that I don't think that he's still capable of closing out games, but I'm going to need to see him not allow those runs, or at least get quick outs like he usually gets. But other than that, I mean, like, this team looks like it's clicking. Like, you're going to need good offense. You're going to need good pitching. You're just going to need to keep doing what you've been doing in this Oakland series. And New York's a good team. I know you mentioned that they're 4-6 in the last 10. I still wouldn't count them out. I wouldn't say that the Blue Jays have an easy series by any means, but you're going to need to at least, I think, honestly, I know a sweep is unrealistic, but you're going to need to win 3, if not 4 games in order to really make up ground, because you look at it going into this Oakland series, the Blue Jays had 30 games left. They now have 27. They need to go at least 20-10, I think, in those last 30. And now it's 17-10. I think you're at the point now where you either win 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 to have a shot. Because if you don't, like, say they drop 2 of these games, well, down the line, if you want to make some type of a push for the playoffs, then you're going to need to sweep another team. And I'm not saying that it's unrealistic or that it's not possible, but you're at the point now where your losses need to be very, very few and far between. So that's just the biggest thing. Like, the Blue Jays, they know what they have. They're leaving the Rogers Center. We know that ever since they've come back there, they've actually not had a lot of luck. They've obviously, that first road trip was very bad in Seattle and LA. But the biggest thing going into this New York series, offense needs to stay hot, and the pitching needs to stay where it's at. Because if the offense goes cold, I think they're done. I don't think that they win many games, maybe one, but same thing with the pitching. Like, you basically, you're at the point now where you're facing the good teams in meaningful situations. You got to be as good as you possibly can, or else you're straight up, you're going to lose. So looking forward to it. Only a couple of hours until game 1. Let's just hope Ryu can match what he did in the last start. Maybe ease off with the earned runs, or have a better go of it towards the end of his outing. But hopefully the offense can also back him up, because I think they only scored 2 runs in his last start. But it'll be exciting. I'm just hoping to see a well-rounded game from this entire team.
Basically, they need to play like the way they did Saturday and Sunday. They need complete hitting. They need complete pitching at the same time, pretty much, to summarize it short from what Jacob said. And, based on what we saw this weekend, you have no reason to believe that they can't do it. I mean, we were talking about Lourdes Gurriel Jr.'s hot streak. Breivik Valera, let's talk about game 2 a little bit too. And Breivik Valera hit a home run. Gurriel continues the hot streak, like I just mentioned. And somebody who has been under the radar and somebody who had a really good series themselves is Danny Jansen. I mean, what a homestand for him, or what a weekend for him. He comes back off the IL, he hits a home run, and he's been hot over his past couple of games that he's been playing in. And the funny thing is, actually, right before he got hurt for the second time, he was starting to figure it out. So I'm glad he carried it over. And for somebody who needs to perform the way, or pretty much needs to perform, it's somebody like Danny Jansen. It's crucial for him, pretty much, for his future as well. And you love to see it. And that's just one of the many people who have been contributing to this offense, and who have been pretty much been leading the way, or not even, just been key contributors. Bo Bichette's also been hot. He went 4 for 4 yesterday. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. went 3 for 5 yesterday as well. Alejandro Kirk, another one who's been hot, 3 for 4 with the home run and 3 RBIs. He had a massive 3-run home run. So all these guys here are hot, and these guys need to carry it over. We know this. And even starting pitching, we know that Jose Barrios had a really good start. That's a couple straight starts now where he's been sharp. I mean, he goes 6 2/3 from that game, and he goes 3 earned runs and a lot of strikeouts. And Robbie Ray, we know Robbie Ray won't be involved in the series, but I mean, each time he pitches, he continues to make that push for that Cy Young award. So based on paper this week as well, In today's game, you have Jameson Tyone going against Hyun-Jin Ryu, and I think Hyun-Jin Ryu is one of the deciding factors of this series, in my opinion, just because the fact that Robbie Ray is not involved. You have pretty much everybody else, like Jacob was saying. You need Hyun-Jin Ryu to pitch well here because we know he's had good moments, he's had really bad moments. He's had bad moments against good teams. He's had good moments against good teams. He needs to be consistent. And this is an important game here because in game 2, you face up against Garrett Cole and Steven Matz is pitching for the Jays in that game as well. If you want to take 3 out of 4, this is maybe the game that they don't necessarily win just off of paper. I'm not saying they're not going to win it for sure, but just off of paper, you know, the way that sounds, it doesn't sound that reasonable. On Wednesday's game, you have, who is it? You have Alek Manoah going for the Jays. I don't think the Yankees have a listed starter, but it's likely going to be Nestor Cortez Jr. And then, of course, in the final game, game 4, you have Jose Barrios, and I believe that lines up Jordan Montgomery. So basically, out of all these games besides Tuesday, you have the advantage for starting pitching. You have the advantage because obviously that the offense can, you know, most likely hit off of these guys. But, you know, this has been a story all year. On paper, it looks like the Jays have the advantage most nights. And, you know, that doesn't always happen. Unfortunately, it's been one of those years where just nothing really goes their way. So you need them to capitalize on this opportunity. And, you know, it couldn't come at a better time on paper based on what we saw this weekend. And, you know, maybe carry over that confidence a little bit more. So I'm not feeling too bad about this series. It's going to be tough. I think, you know, I know you need 3 out of 4, and I guess at worst you'll take a split, but for a team that needs to continue to make a push, you got to win this series, and I'm sure they know that. So that's why I'm holding out hope and crossing my fingers that happens. We know the bullpen, you know, they had some rough spots, they had some good spots. That game on Saturday when Oakland kind of rallied back, that was concerning. That was scary. But, you know, the one thing I take away too, which is a really bright spot from the bullpen yesterday, and I mentioned him a little bit based off of his first appearance on Friday, was Nate Pearson. He was sharp, much better and much different pitcher in that game yesterday. He goes 1 inning, 3 strikeouts, strikes out the side in that. And if he can continue that consistency, he's going to be a weapon of this bullpen for the rest of the year. I'm not saying, first of all, do the Jays, you know, throw him in a tough, high leverage situation this series? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised whatsoever. It likely won't come today. You might see it in game 2 or game 3 because of that. They've gone through a lot of people who are shaky. Joakim Soria was a disaster on Saturday. And, you know, you might not have a lot of options to go to. Nate Pearson might have his name called at some point in this series. And again, one guy who's been coming back and who's been continuing to pitch in AAA is Julian Merriweather. I think the Jay said it's a 50-50 chance he is in New York for this series. If he is also back with the team, you have to imagine that he's going to be one guy who's going to be relied upon heavily as well. Do I think it's necessarily fair for them to be thrown in the fire right away? Maybe not, but based on what we've seen from the bullpen this year, and if you want to make the playoffs, you really have no choice. You really have no choice at all. So a lot of things need to go right. On paper, it doesn't look as bad in terms of the starting pitching, but the Jays got to continue this hot streak. They got to carry things over, and both the pitching and the hitting has to be consistent at the same time.
Yeah, you definitely like the bullpen reinforcements that the Blue Jays are getting. Nate Pearson, however rough he may have looked in his first appearance, he came back out there and did what, you know, we all are hoping him to do, to have him do in the later innings and throw that, you know, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, that slider, and get those strikeouts, which is exactly what the Blue Jays need in their bullpen. They really don't have a high-velocity guy except for Jordan Romano. So to have Nate Pearson in there and being able to do what he did the other day, that's really important, and what he's done for a couple appearances in the minors. So that's really important. And yeah, getting Julian Merriweather back would be huge as well. It sounds like he's going to be back in this series against the Yankees. If he's not, I would be surprised if he's not back by the end of the next series. So that's another reinforcement for the Blue Jays to get in the back end of their bullpen, and you got to be pretty happy with that as well. Let's talk about Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien, because both of these players are guys that the Blue Jays should be trying to extend, or at least be talking about re-signing once it gets into free agency. And we saw this week, we had finally our first bit of news about the extension attempts by the Toronto Blue Jays. They have already attempted to extend Marcus Semien. They plan to approach Robbie Ray in the offseason about re-signing him to a long-term contract. This was reported by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, and like I said, it was kind of the first bit of news we've heard about extensions, because obviously like for months now, everyone's been bantering about how much these guys deserve and whether the Blue Jays will be willing to fork over the money or whether they'd rather explore their options in free agency. But it seems like the Blue Jays are serious about getting these guys back, or at least right now they're entertaining the possibility. We've already talked about how much money it'll take to get these guys back. I think the expectation from all of us for Robbie Ray was, I think I said 125 for his deal. Both of you guys were in the same ballpark, if I remember correctly. I don't think we talked about Marcus Semien, how much he'll command in a free agency deal, though. So, or an extension, obviously, if it comes to that. Personally, I look at the model of DJ LeMahieu's contract last offseason as kind of a general idea of what we can expect Marcus Semien to command this offseason, or like I said, if he gets an extension. And LeMahieu got, I think it was 6 years, $90 million. And he was kind of looking for more of the long term. He was looking for getting towards $100 million instead of taking a shorter term, higher average annual value deal. I think we won't see the same thing with Marcus Semien, but Marcus Semien is a more valuable player. So I think 5 years, 100 million, 5 years, 110 million, around there, maybe even higher, given what we saw the Blue Jays give to George Springer, what it took to get him to come north of the border. If the Blue Jays are signing someone like Simeon, a high profile guy like that, and they're trying to ask him to shift over to second base permanently, I think it's going to take a little bit more to entice him north of the border, but I think that's kind of the ballpark number range we're looking at. 100 million, 110 million, maybe it gets up to 120, 125, somewhere around there for Marcus Semien. Where do you guys think the contract will end up?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo you. I think that he's gonna command at least 25 million a season, and he's making 18 this year. I don't know exactly what the qualifying offer is, but it's probably around that. It's usually been around the high teens. He's probably going to command, I think, at least 25 million a season. And he is getting a little bit older. I think that the term is also important because you talk about Robbie Ray, about him last week. The thing with them is, say Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien, say they sign a contract this season, which they're expected to do. Say it's 2 years, or what happens? Say they're not as good as they were this season in those next 2 years, then their next contract, it's going to be very tough to come by, and it'll be a lot less than what they signed this year. So they're kind of looking to lock themselves up, get themselves a guaranteed amount of money throughout the next 4 or 5 years. But they also, they want that they want money. That's the thing, and then they want to be guaranteed that they're going to make their money this season, but also in the next couple seasons because of how good they were this year. And I think it does make sense. 5 years, I'm going to say 125 million, $25 million average annual value. Do the Blue Jays fork that over? It's going to be tough. I mean, can they afford it? Yes. But when you consider you also have Robbie Ray to re-sign, it'll be, I think it will, it's realistic. I think it's likely, or it's at least possible. It depends on how the offseason how it transpires. And I do think that Simeon might have a liking to come back. I mean, if he wants to win a World Series in the next couple seasons, it definitely could happen here, but I'm not sure. I'm going to say it's a 50-50 on Robbie Ray. If he comes back, I think it's a lot higher for Robbie Ray, but it'll be tough, I think, for Simeon. Do I think he wants to come back? Yes. I think the Blue Jays can afford him. It's something where I think you just kind of have to wait and see, but easily he could be one of the biggest offseason acquisitions for the teams, or reacquisitions, really, if he is to come back and perform at as high of a level that he is this year.
Yeah, you know what? I honestly think it's going to be pretty similar to what Robbie Ray gets, or even what they both asked for. And really, I'm not going to repeat it because I kind of pretty much agree with both of you, but really when you add both of them up, if you want to keep both or any of the chances, it's going to be pretty much around 200 million to keep both of them. And that's without signing Teoscar Hernandez to an extension. We know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to be, I think he's arbitration eligible this winter. Bo Bichette's also going to need a raise eventually. All these guys, we're getting to the point now where they're going to be asking for a raise. And the Jays are going to have to continue to spend if they want to keep this core together. Now, I do think they can. And based on what we've seen, I think Ross Atkins kind of hinted that their budget will be increasing, which is good news because they have to if that's the case. And there's just, a lot of things need to go right for them to kind of fit everybody in here. But I do think that they have the opportunity to do it. I don't know if the Jays will, but the question I have, or what I wonder about the Semien report, when Ken Rosenthal reported that the Jays unsuccessfully, I guess, offered him an extension was, I'm kind of curious just to know, like, was it an actual offer? Was it just talking? Like, and if I'm Marcus Semien, obviously I would do the same thing and I'd go to the market unless it's a severe overpay. I think he just deserved that right to do that. And the one thing I kind of wonder about is that they haven't spoken to Robbie Ray yet. So, does that kind of make you feel like they have a better chance, or they're more confident with talking to Ray and waiting until the winter? And maybe they're not as confident with bringing Simeon back. Now, I've said it before on this podcast that I think out of the two, you'd rather bring back Robbie Ray. And even if you take that away, I think you have a better chance of bringing back Robbie Ray. I think one of them is for sure going to be coming back. If you're going to ask me at the beginning of the year, or even, in a situation from a couple of years ago, I think both of them would be gone. But this is a competitive team. There's an attraction here and to win, and there's a contraction here to compete. And I'm fully confident that at least one of them are going to stay. I don't know if everyone would agree with that. I think a few people think both of them are going to leave, but the one thing too, when you look at their payroll, is that the Jays have a lot of money coming off the books. And, you want to talk about pretty much salary that they've been paying this year. They're still paying Tanner Roark $12 million. But the one thing I didn't realize until a couple of days ago is that they're still paying Troy Tulowitzki for this year. They owe him $4 million. They're still paying Tyler Chatwood. They took on Brad Hand's entire deal. Shun Yamaguchi, they're still paying. You got to remember too, they're paying Kirby Yates as well. There's a lot of people here that they've been paying who aren't even on the roster. And that's usually, you see that a lot in sports, but you have to remember that these are all contracts that are going to be coming off the books. And, that potentially gives the Jays more flexibility, more money to spend. And I think a lot of people kind of oversee that, is that there is a lot of money coming off the books this winter. So realistically, what I'm trying to say is, I personally believe, and obviously we don't really have any insight in what they're actually spending in terms of their payroll or what is available to them, the flexibility they have, their priorities. But if they wanted to, I firmly believe they can keep both of them. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they're willing to do that because of the cost, but I really firmly believe, based on the amount of money they have left to spend, if they really wanted to, they can do it. But I don't know if they will. I think one of the two for sure will be back, like I mentioned. And I think just a lot of people kind of agree with all of us and, have that same mindset that if any of them were to come back, it's going to be Robbie Ray. And I personally believe you need Robbie Ray more. And that's crazy to say from both of them, because both of them have had spectacular years. And it's been, a complete honor watching both of them play for this team this year. And that's another reason why when you look back on this season, if the Jays do fail to make the playoffs, you can make that argument that you wasted a good year out of both of these guys and arguably one of the best teams that you've ever had on paper. The Jays got both of these guys at a bargain. They took a chance on them. They both took a chance on themselves, including Marcus Semien and Robbie Ray. And it's paid off for both sides. They're both going to be getting paid. And it's really going to be up to the Jays in terms of what they decide to do this winter. And, who knows, even if they approach both of them, there's going to be other plans that they have. There's going to be other rumors, other players that we don't even know about who they're going to be targeting. I do think it's going to be a busy winter for them. I think they will be active. I think they will continue to spend no matter who it is, but you'd like to see both of them back. I obviously wouldn't, but and if you had to go about or down to, you choose one or the other, I still got to choose Robbie Ray. And it's just crazy to turn that down after what Marcus Simeon's done this year, but it's going to be tough. And both of them have earned the right to go to the market and see what they can get from all 30 teams, because they're going to have interest from everybody. I don't know how, if you're a team, especially if you can afford them, how you won't have interest in either of those two.
Yeah. It's really like it's choosing between a guy that's going to finish in the top 3 of Cy Young voting or a guy that's going to finish in the top 5 of MVP voting. It's like, if you're a Blue Jay fan, if you're the Blue Jay front office, this is a good problem to have. And I think, like what you're saying, Bryson, it's very clear that Rogers, if they want to sign both these guys, they can and they will. Like, there's nothing stopping the Blue Jays from spending this money. The Blue Jays aren't the Royals. They aren't the Tampa Bay Rays. The Blue Jays are a big market team. They have the money to spend. They have the financial backing of Rogers to spend this money on both these guys. So if the Blue Jay front office wants both these guys back, if Rogers is willing to spend that money, they can get these guys back. That's not the problem. I think the problem is the question of the Blue Jays' future and what else they have in store for this offseason. So do you spend that money on Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien, or do you spend that money on Robbie Ray and another free agent starter? Or do you spend that money on Marcus Semien and a free agent reliever? Or do you spend that money buying out the contract in a trade of a couple relievers that you need on the team? Like, where do you want to spend this money? Because this money is going to get spent. The Blue Jays have this money and they have this flexibility years down the road in terms of their salary cap and their bankroll. So it's just a question of where you spend it and whether you want to spend it all this offseason on these two guys, or whether you want to allocate some to extensions for some of the younger players, to all this other stuff that the Blue Jays have to do. So that's a real question. And I think it's interesting that the Blue Jays seem to be prioritizing Marcus Semien right now. I think maybe that means that it's an indication that we kind of underestimate his impact on this team, not just on the field, obviously, because we've seen what he's done on the field, but we also know kind of who he is off the field. And I think that kind of gets forgotten a lot of the time. But you look at him in Oakland, there were guys who were very mad at the team and really sad that he left and didn't re-sign with the Athletics because of the impact he had on the clubhouse. They called him captain because he was, the leader in that clubhouse. He was such a good guy. We've heard from Charlie Montoyo that he's the hardest working baseball player he's ever met. I think that's something that's underestimated. And we know how much this front office values the personal side of things, values the impact a person has in the clubhouse and off the field in terms of work ethic. And I think the fact that they are trying to go after Marcus Semien first, whether that's just because they think it works for their money better, whether they think Marcus Semien is going to be cheaper, or they've heard that Robbie Ray wants to test the market more, I don't know, but I think it shows that they value Marcus Semien a lot behind the scenes, even more than what we see on the field. So that doesn't really tell us anything about who they're going to sign or who they should spend more money on. I think it's just interesting that that's the approach that they're kind of taking when we look at both these guys and we're in a conundrum of who we should sign. It seems like the Blue Jays are prioritizing Marcus Semien. And if I had to wager, I think that would be part of the reason why.
That's totally fair. And I mean, honestly, like the team, I think without Simeon has a lot of chemistry, but Simeon just adds to that. And it's obvious that at least for this season, he's happy here. And should he stay, I think he could easily be part of a very competitive team for the duration of his contract. Like if he signs a 4-year deal, he'll probably be, or the Blue Jays will probably be competitive all 4 of those seasons. Or I say probably, I think it's almost certain that they would be. So it definitely, he would still, I think, be one of the biggest acquisitions, even if they get Robbie Ray. Obviously bringing back both of them would just make the offseason, I think, complete almost. But yeah, I'm at the point where I would, if I could only have one, I would prefer Robbie Ray, just because the Blue Jays need pitching, whereas they do have some infield prospects coming up within the next couple seasons. However, I'm fine if they only get Robbie Ray, like or get Marcus Semien. Like I'm neutral. Yes, I know I'm contradicting myself, but I would prefer Robbie Ray, but I'm happy with any outcome as long as one of them come back, or one of them or both of them. So if Simeon's able to come back and perform at even somewhat close to what he's at this season, like if he's able to go 260, 255-ish with 25 to 30 home runs, that's a very, very successful season. And that's a very successful contract, I think. So if you bring him back, you get that type of performance, then the infield, I think, would be complete. Probably, then you got the whole can of worms to open up with extensions and all these guys that we've talked about for the last couple of years, how they're on rookie deals and whatever. They'll have to be worked around. But if you bring Simeon back, I think that solves a lot of the problems. Then you just worry about keeping guys for longer than you currently have them. But it'll be very interesting. I think Ross Atkins is I don't envy his position right now. I think it will be tough for him to try and get those guys back, but especially considering that a lot of other competitive teams are going to want them as well. But it'll be fun to be along for the ride, I guess, is the best way to put it. And we'll see who is able to come back. I think that both of them do want to come back, or to some extent want to come back, want to return, and they want to win. And if you want to win, you probably come back to this team. But yeah, if you can bring both of those guys back, I think it would make the offseason complete. And then I think it would make for a very competitive team over a very long time.
I completely agree with what Mark said a few minutes ago. It's a good problem to have. You'd rather be dealing with this than dealing with nobody. And it's an intriguing thing that's going to come this winter. But you know what? As much as that report came out yesterday, I'm still focused on the rest of the year, the Jays making that playoff push and dealing with what we have for the last month. And we all know this series is going to be important. So I guess to end things off before you do, Mark, I mean, any predictions this series? Because we were pretty close or pretty bang on with our last one. So let's hear it again. Let's go around of what's happening this series. Go.
Well, I'm excited to hear what you say, because apparently whatever you say is just manifested into reality. But I'm torn between saying the Blue Jays take 2 of 2, go 2 and 2, or they take 3 of 4. I'll say 3 of 4. Why not? I was a little bit optimistic last series. I think, again, like I said last series, I think it's probably going to bite me in the butt. I think if I'm being extremely realistic, it'll be a 2-2 split. But yeah, I'll go 3 and 1. The Blue Jays take 3 or 4.
Well, now that you said that, I kind of feel obligated to say something different. And part of the problem is it's either a sweep or 2 of 2. I don't think a
No
sweep's
way.
likely. I'm gonna, whatever. I'm gonna say 3 or 4 as well. I think that it's a split is worst case scenario. I'd still take it. I mean, it's not the ideal situation, but I think 3 or 4. I mentioned the starting pitchers earlier in the episode. I think 3 or 4 is probably likely. Yeah,
I'm
I don't.
thinking about
Yeah, we're
it.
at the point.
I'm thinking about it, but it's
Do
4. I
it.
can't
Do it.
over 4 games. I have to agree with both of you. I think 3 out of 4 just because too, like this is a realistic 3 out of 4 based on these matchups, based on the starting pitching. I think today is really important to see what's going to happen as well. Like I mentioned earlier with Hyun-Jin Ryu, but based off of what we've seen on paper, you have to imagine 3 out of 4, besides that Gurriel Cole start, favors the Jays. You got to think 3 out of 4. I'm not going to predict a split. That's just not acceptable. So 3 out of 4, the Jays take it, and then they roll into Baltimore on a winning note. That is the goal. That is the hope. And I think they can do it based on what we saw this weekend.
It's also just so hard to sweep 4-game series. Like
Exactly.
It's next to impossible to sweep. Like the last 4-game series I remember the Jays sweeping, I think was against the Mariners, maybe in, I don't know if it was 2019 or 2018.
It's a while ago.
Yeah, it's been a while since something like that has happened. So it's so hard to do that. So obviously not predicting a sweep, but all of us are optimistic. Splitting this series is really the worst case scenario that keeps the Blue Jays alive. I think if you lose 3 of 4, they're out of it. And I don't know how many times we have to say that. They always give themselves new life just when we think they're done. And just when we think they're finally taken off, they find a way to screw it up. But hopefully that's not the case this series. Hopefully they finally make that push. And we will see after this Yankees series. But until then, you can rate and view our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Just helps spread the word about what we're doing. You can support our podcast on Patreon. That's patreon.com/section138pod. You can watch our episodes on YouTube. And if you're watching these episodes, you can listen to them wherever you find podcasts. And you can also stay up to date with everything we're doing on social media at Section138pod. That's on Twitter and Instagram. Until next week, until after this series against the Yankees, which is hopefully a good one, we'll catch you then.